Hello and welcome. I call the channel the Jungle Nook, and today I want to talk about perlite and vermiculite. I'll explain what each of these materials are, how, when, and why to use them, and we'll get into the similarities as well as the differences between both of them. But before we go into the other room where I have some examples set up for you, but I think it's important that you understand that although both perlite and vermiculite will release some nutrients, things like nitrogen, calcium, iron, zinc, magnesium, there's a whole bunch of different things they release. I don't want you to be concerned with adjusting the fertilizer that you're providing your plants, regardless how much that you put in. They're not going to be in any significant amount to help or harm your plant. Just continue giving your plants a all-purpose fertilizer that has the primary nutrients at a 3-to-1 ratio. What I mean by that, the primary nutrients, the first three that will be listed, you never want to use those numbers in equal amounts. You don't want to use a balanced fertilizer because a plant requires 3 times as much nitrogen as it has phosphorus. And the potassium, the last number, you just want that somewhere in between the first two. You want to multiply that second number by 3, and that's what you want for your nitrogen for the first number, a 3-to-1 ratio. That could be a 24, 8, 12. That would be a good ratio. So let's go into the other room now. I have some examples set up. Here I got perlite, which is white, and it's kind of a hard material. And then over here is the vermiculite, which is a soft material, and it's more of a tan or a beige. The first thing I want to do is talk about the similarities between perlite and vermiculite. Because if you compare these two products side by side and you're reading the bag as to what they do, it can get a little confusing because, and it's accurate, but they both say they promote root health, nice, good, strong, healthy roots. And that they do this by helping to prevent compaction within the potting soil. They also both help to retain moisture and to help to provide good aeration, oxygen within the soil. That's all true, but there are some real differences between these two products. Perlite, now this is a material that is actually made from volcanic glass that has a lot of moisture within the glass. And what they do is they superheat it, that moisture expands, becomes a vapor, and it actually cracks the glass and escapes. And that's how peat moss gets its real coarse characteristic there, the structure of it's real coarse or porous. And water can actually pass right through it. And it's made from volcanic glass. Whereas vermiculite is actually made from a clay material very similar to something like mica. And they do the same thing with this. They heat it up because there's a lot of moisture in there. And this material, when it releases its moisture, it's soft still. And what it will do is it will actually absorb water and nutrients right into it. And it can hold 4 times its volume in water. And it will retain that moisture for quite a while. So the real difference is perlite allows water to drain through it. And then it provides air pockets within the soil. So there's plenty of oxygen within the soil. It helps to drain the soil of excess water. And it helps to aerate the soil as well. Those two things will help to reduce your likelihood of getting root rot. Now, the vermiculite, that will absorb the water. And, you know, the water is what's absorbing the nutrients. So it's absorbing nutrient-rich moisture in it. And it will hold it there for an extended amount of time and begin releasing it slowly. And what happens is as the soil around the vermiculite is drying out, it's pulling the moisture out of the vermiculite. Once the vermiculite's dry, yes, it's also helping with aeration. But this is primarily for moisture and nutrient retention, whereas the perlite is for drainage and aeration of the soil. Perlite is what I use the most of because most of the plants that I grow are tropical plants. They come from a tropical climate. So I water my plants a lot and quite heavily. So by adding perlite into the soil, I am making sure that I am dramatically reducing the likelihood of root rot because my soil is able to drain really well and fast. And there's plenty of aeration in there. A high water content within the soil, a wet soil that does not have aeration, that is what promotes pathogens, which are basically just a classification of fungus, which causes root rot. That is something that this is great at helping to prevent because it really doesn't retain the moisture. It will get wet, the water will pass through it, but real rapidly that water's gone and you're left with air pockets within the soil. Whereas the vermiculite is going to do a great job at keeping plants that like to be moist. That's what this stuff is great for. Things like peace lilies and ferns. This will help to ensure that your soil's not overly drying out. Cactus and succulents, this stuff's great to mix in with that soil. My pots are comprised of 30 to 40% perlite. If I was doing something like cactus or succulents, then I would probably use something like a 50, 60, 70, maybe even 80%, depending on the plant. Cactus, probably 80% perlite. If I was doing something like a hanging basket that's outside where it's going to dry out quicker, or it's hung high up towards my ceilings, or even a plant on the floor like a peace lily, then I would probably also add into that maybe 20, 30%, depending on the plant, 20 to 30% vermiculite. I never have used vermiculite alone by itself because plants do still need aeration and drainage. So even if I was starting seeds, okay, say I was starting some plants by seeds, that there's this thing called damping off, which is basically just a fungus that is notorious for killing seedlings, and that's because of too much moisture. What I would do for something like seedlings, right here, I have some Miracle-Gro potting mix, and you can probably see in there is a little bit of perlite. There's never enough perlite in potting mixes, really. So what I would do is I would add some perlite first in my mix for my seedlings. And you don't have to use Miracle-Gro potting mix. You could just be using pure peat moss. And I'll mix that up real good. So now I know that it has enough perlite in there to be well draining. Of course, it would be in a pot or something that also drains. This is just for demonstration. So now I got a good mixture, a good ratio of perlite and peat moss in here. And then I would plant my seeds. And next, what I would do is I would just take some of this vermiculite and just sprinkle a little bit of this over the top. Not an actual layer, but I have sprinkled some over the top. This is for starting seeds. And what will happen is that vermiculite on top is going to help to keep the soil moist and keep the surface moist right where it's in contact with the seeds. But it will absorb enough moisture so that there's not too much moisture for fungus, and it will slowly release this moisture at a rate that's not going to promote fungus or mold or mildew, but will keep the seeds evenly moist. This is a great way. Just sprinkling some of that vermiculite right on top of this is a great way to prevent damping off for seeds. But let's say this was going to be a hanging basket or, again, peace lilies. I would then maybe add as much as an equal amount. I probably just put about maybe 30% perlite in there as opposed to how much peat moss. Now I just put about 30% vermiculite. And this mixture will be great for hanging baskets inside or outside and things like peace lilies. Now just mix that up real good. And now I have that mix right there. And again, you don't have to use Miracle-Gro potting mix. You can literally just use, buy a bulk bag of peat moss or cocoa coir. Peat moss and cocoa coir, basically, they're two different products, but they work in exactly the same way, really. Both of these products here, neither one of them will influence the pH of your potting mix. These are both neutral, right around 7 to 7.5. So you don't have to be concerned with these altering the pH within the soil and causing any kind of issues with the available nutrients that's in your soil or the ability of the plant to be able to absorb them.